The lecture hall stretched 3 stories high, carved from polished obsidian that reflected the twin suns of Arath Prime. 200 cadets from 40 different species sat in ascending rows, their attention fixed on the holographic display projecting combat scenarios above the central platform. Commander Zrathix, a towering Kortheen with 4 arms and midnight blue scales, gestured toward the images with practiced authority. Maya Chen sat in the back row, her small frame nearly invisible among the hulking forms surrounding her. She was the only human in the entire academy, a fact that everyone reminded her of daily. Her dark eyes tracked the commander's movements as he cycled through footage of various species engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Mandibles clashed, claws raked, venomous spines extended. Each species fought with their natural weapons, evolutionary advantages honed over millions of years. Notice the Draxian tail sweep, Zrathix announced, his translator converting his clicking language into Federation standard. 30,000 years of development. The calcium deposits in their vertebrae can shatter titanium alloys. Observe the Velcorn pincer grip, hydraulic pressure exceeding 12,000 pounds per square inch. These are tools forged by survival, refined by countless generations. A Tharn cadet 3 seats over from Maya snorted. A wet bubbling sound. What about humans, Commander? What natural weapons do they possess? Maya's jaw tightened. She knew this dance. It happened in every class, every training session, every meal in the cafeteria. The question that always came back to her species, to her inadequacy, to her soft skin and blunt nails and pathetic teeth. Zrathix's 4 eyes swiveled toward her briefly before returning to his holographic display. Humans are primarily tool users. Their evolutionary path favored intelligence over physical prowess. They possess no natural armor, no venomous glands, no reinforced skeletal structure. Their combat effectiveness relies entirely on manufactured weapons and tactical thinking. Remove those advantages, and a human becomes, quite frankly, defenseless. Laughter rippled through the hall. Not cruel, exactly. More like the sympathetic chuckle reserved for the class pet, the mascot who tried but could never truly compete. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she remained motionless, her breathing steady. The Tharn cadet turned to look at her directly, his 3-fingered hand raised in what his species considered a friendly gesture. No offense intended, Chen, it is simply biological fact. My people have been warriors for 6,000 generations. We respect human ingenuity with machinery and strategy, but in a barehanded confrontation, well, he left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. None taken, Kral, Maya replied softly. Her voice barely carried over the ambient hum of the environmental systems. Zrathix continued his lecture, moving into the philosophical aspects of natural weaponry versus technological enhancement. Maya tuned him out. She had heard it all before, in a dozen different iterations, from 100 different voices. Humans were weak, humans were fragile, humans needed their guns and their ships, and their armor because without them they were nothing. Her right hand curled slowly into a fist beneath the desk. The scars across her knuckles, faint white lines against her brown skin, caught the light from the holographic display. Memories flickered through her mind, unbidden and unwelcome. The smell of recycled air in a cargo hold, the taste of blood in her mouth, the sound of breaking bone echoing off metal walls. After the lecture, Maya walked alone through the crystal corridors of the academy. The architecture here was designed for beings larger than her, and she felt perpetually small, perpetually out of place. Other cadets passed in groups, their conversations a mixture of dozens of languages filtered through translation implants. She caught fragments as they went by. Did you see the look on her face when Zrathix said defenseless? I almost felt sorry for her. Why did the Federation even accept a human? They are technologically advanced, sure, but individually they are liability candidates. Maya kept her eyes forward and her pace steady. 3 months at the academy. 3 months of being the example, the cautionary tale, the proof that some species simply were not meant for military service. She had scored top marks in every written examination, perfect simulations in tactical analysis, flawless results in engineering assessments. None of it mattered when your instructors believed you would crumble the moment violence became personal. Her quarters were small, designed for solo occupancy. She preferred it that way. The moment the door sealed behind her, she moved to the corner of the room where she had cleared enough space for what she needed. No equipment, no weights, no training dummies, just empty floor and her own body. She dropped into a ready stance, weight distributed, center of gravity low. Then she moved. Not the graceful flowing forms taught in the Academy's official combat courses, not the systematic techniques designed for beings with claws and extra limbs and chitinous armor. This was something older, something human, something carved from desperation and a necessity and 10,000 years of humans killing humans. Her fists struck empty air with controlled fury. Jabs, crosses, hooks, uppercuts. Each movement precise, economical, built on the fundamental truth that humans had always been their own worst enemy. No species in the galaxy had perfected the art of killing their own kind quite like humanity. While the Kravathi fought over territory and the Draxians over resources, humans had developed martial sciences specifically to overcome other humans, beings with the same lack of natural weapons, the same vulnerable bodies. Sweat soaked through her shirt. Her muscles burned. She transitioned into groundwork, the techniques that assumed your opponent had already taken you down because standing and trading blows was a luxury you could not afford. Chokes, joint locks, submissions designed to render size advantages meaningless. A human arm bent the wrong way, broke just as easily as a Tharn arm. A human neck compressed just as fatally as a Velkhorn neck. An hour passed. Then two. Finally, Maya stopped, her chest heaving, her body trembling with exhaustion. She stood in the center of her quarters, fists still clenched, and allowed herself a bitter smile. Let them believe humans were defenseless. Let them think she was helpless without a weapon. The galaxy had no idea what humans were capable of when pushed hard enough, when survival demanded more than tools and tactics. The next morning she arrived early for advanced combat theory. The lecture hall was nearly empty, just a few cadets reviewing notes in the lower rows. Maya climbed to her usual seat in the back and waited. Slowly the room filled. Kral the Tharn lumbered in with his squadmates. A cluster of Velkhorn took positions near the front, their chittering conversation too quick for the translators to keep pace. Commander Zrathix entered precisely at the designated start time, his forearms carrying data tablets and projection orbs. Today we examine historical combat footage from various species conflicts. Zrathix announced without preamble. You will analyze tactical decisions, identify mistakes, and propose alternative approaches. This is about learning from the past to survive the future. The lights dimmed. The holographic display activated, showing grainy footage from a war Maya did not recognize. Two species she could not identify tore each other apart in brutal close-quarters fighting. Zrathix provided commentary pointing out moments of brilliance and catastrophic errors. 3 different battles played out. A Draxian civil war. A Kravathi territorial dispute. A multi-species border conflict that had ended only through exhaustive negotiation. Each time, Zrathix paused to highlight specific techniques, specific advantages exploited, specific weaknesses exposed, then new footage appeared. The quality was different, sharper, more recent. The setting was immediately recognizable to Maya. A cargo hauler's civilian class, drifting in neutral space. The timestamp indicated this had occurred just 8 months ago. Her blood turned to ice. This final example is admittedly unusual. Zrathix said. A human civilian transport was intercepted by Kortheen pirates. The Kortheen are, as you know, one of the galaxy's most feared raider species. They stand 8 feet tall, possess considerable natural strength, and have been engaging in violent theft for centuries. The crew of this particular human vessel was small, 4 individuals total. 3 were killed immediately when the Kortheen boarded. Maya's hands gripped the edge of her desk. She knew what came next. She had lived what came next. The 4th crew member was a female human, aged 24 at the time. Zrathix continued. The Kortheen assumed she would surrender or flee to an escape pod. Instead, something unexpected occurred. I want you to watch this footage carefully and identify the tactical errors made by both parties. The hologram showed the cargo hold from a security camera angle. 5 Kortheen warriors advanced through the narrow space, their massive forms barely fitting between the storage containers. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered meaningful resistance. Then a figure dropped from the overhead catwalk, landing behind the last warrior in formation. Even in the low-resolution footage, Maya recognized herself, her younger self, hair longer than, wearing the same blue utility jumpsuit she had worn for 3 years on the hauler. She recognized the exact moment when her fear had crystallized into something colder, something that understood survival was no longer about hiding or running. The Kortheen warrior turned, and Maya's recorded self was already moving. She did not try to match his strength or his reach. Instead, she went low inside his guard, her fist driving up into his throat with every ounce of force she could generate. The warrior staggered, his roar cutting off into a wet gurgle. Before he could recover, she was behind him, her arm locked around his thick neck, her legs wrapped around his torso, all her body weight leveraged into a choke that compressed his carotid arteries. The lecture hall was absolutely silent. 200 cadets watched as the massive Kortheen warrior thrashed, trying to dislodge the small human clinging to him like a parasite. His 3 companions turned, weapons raising, but hesitated because their comrade was in the way. That hesitation cost them. The warrior collapsed. Maya's recorded self released him and rolled toward the nearest storage container in a single fluid motion. The Kortheen opened fire, their plasma rounds scorching the metal where she had been a fraction of a second earlier. She used the containers as cover, drew them deeper into the hold, separated them. What followed was not a fight. It was a hunt in reverse, a demonstration of what humans had learned across millennia of being the galaxy's most efficient killers of other humans. Maya watched herself move through the cargo hold like a ghost, striking from unexpected angles, targeting joints and throats and eyes, using the environment to multiply her limited strength. The Kortheen had armor and weapons and size and natural advantages. Maya had desperation and technique and the accumulated knowledge of every human martial art ever developed. One by one they fell. Not easily, not cleanly, but inevitably. When the footage ended, the lights remained dim. Commander Zrathix stood motionless at the front of the hall, all 4 of his eyes fixed on the frozen final frame. The image showed Maya standing among 4 dead Kortheen, her jumpsuit torn, her face covered in blood from a split eyebrow, her hands still raised in a fighting stance despite the fact that no enemies remained. "I believe," Zrathix said slowly, "that I owe Cadet Chen an apology." Every head in the lecture hall turned toward the back row, 200 pairs of eyes representing 40 different species, all focused on Maya. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor in the silence. "Permission to speak, Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Granted. Yesterday you stated that humans possess no natural weapons, that we are defenseless without our technology." Maya began walking down the steps toward the central platform, her movements measured and deliberate. "You were correct in one sense. We have no claws, no venomous glands, no armor plating. But you made a critical error in your assessment." She reached the platform and stood directly in front of Zrathix, her 5'4" frame dwarfed by his 9-foot height. "Humans have been fighting barehanded for our entire existence. Not against other species, against each other. We developed hundreds of martial disciplines specifically designed to overcome opponents with the same lack of natural weapons. Every technique, every strategy, every principle was refined through generations of humans killing humans." Kral the Tharn stood from his seat. "With respect, Cadet Chen, that footage shows you killed 4 Kortheen, an impressive feat." "Certainly, but it proves nothing about your claims regarding barehanded combat. You used environmental advantages, ambush tactics, and clearly had some form of training." Maya turned to face him, and something in her expression made several cadets lean back involuntarily. "Then perhaps we should test it. You believe your species' 6,000 generations of warriors gives you an advantage in barehanded combat. I propose a demonstration. No weapons, no armor, just you and me in the training circle." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. Zrathix raised one hand for silence. "Cadet Chen, I appreciate your passion, but such a challenge would be inappropriate. Kral outweighs you by 200 pounds and possesses significant reach advantage." "Yes, Commander," Maya replied. "Just like the Kortheen did, just like every opponent humans have faced throughout our history did. We built our martial sciences around overcoming those exact disadvantages." Kral descended the steps slowly, his expression unreadable. "If the commander permits it, I accept your challenge, but I must warn you, Chen. I will not hold back simply because you are smaller." "Good," Maya said quietly. "Neither will I." The training circle occupied the central floor of the combat facility, a perfectly round space 30 feet in diameter surrounded by energy barriers that would prevent interference. Cadets packed the observation galleries, word having spread through the academy like wildfire. A human challenging a Tharn to unarmed combat was either unprecedented brilliance or spectacular stupidity, and no one wanted to miss witnessing which it would be. Maya stood at one edge of the circle, wearing the standard academy training uniform, her hands wrapped in minimal protective tape. Across from her, Kral performed elaborate stretching rituals, his three-fingered hands flexing, his powerful legs testing their range of motion. Medical personnel stood ready at multiple stations, their equipment prepared for the injuries they assumed were inevitable. Commander Zrathix entered the observation area, accompanied by 3 other senior instructors. His 4 eyes found Maya, and something in his expression had shifted since the lecture. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginning of curiosity. "This is a sanctioned training exercise," Zrathix announced, his voice amplified throughout the facility. "Standard rules apply. Fight continues until submission, unconsciousness, or medical override. Lethal techniques are forbidden. Begin when ready." Kral stepped into the circle with confidence, his stance wide and solid. Maya circled slowly, staying light on her feet, studying his movement. The Tharn were dangerous opponents, their bone density triple that of humans, their muscle fibers designed for explosive power. Everything about Kral's species had evolved for direct confrontation, for standing ground and overwhelming opposition through sheer physical dominance. "I will try to make this quick," Kral said, his translator rendering his bubbling speech into Federation standard. "For your dignity." Maya did not respond. She continued circling, watching his feet, his center of balance, the way his weight distributed. Around the gallery, cadets placed bets, the odds running heavily against her. She heard fragments of their conversation. 30 seconds, maximum. "She is brave, but delusional. Someone should stop this before she gets seriously hurt." Kral lunged forward with surprising speed for his bulk, his long arms reaching to grab her. Maya slipped to the side, her smaller frame allowing her to change direction faster than his momentum could adjust. She struck his extended arm, not hard enough to damage but enough to gauge his reaction time and pain tolerance. Kral turned smoothly, adapting, his warrior training evident in how quickly he recalibrated. They exchanged testing strikes. Kral's fist whistled past Maya's head close enough that she felt the displacement of air. Her counter-strike hit his ribs solidly, and she felt her knuckles protest against the density of his bone structure. Fighting a Tharn was like fighting a biological tank. "You are fast," Kral acknowledged, "but speed means nothing without power." He pressed forward, using his reach advantage to force Maya backward. She gave ground strategically, studying his patterns, watching for the opening she knew would come. Every fighter had habits, tells, moments where muscle memory overrode tactical thinking. Kral was well trained, but he was trained to fight other Tharn, beings who matched his size and structure. Maya waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then she saw it. The micro-adjustment in his stance before he threw his dominant right hand, a tiny tell that gave her the fraction of a second she needed. When the punch came, she did not move backward. She moved in, stepping inside his reach where his power could not fully generate. Her elbow snapped up into his extended arm just above the joint, using his own momentum against the leverage point. Kral grunted in surprise but recovered quickly, pulling back and resetting. Maya noted the hesitation in his right arm, the brief protection of the struck joint. She had planted the seed of doubt, made him aware that his superior strength meant nothing if she never allowed him to fully deploy it. They continued the dance. Kral grew more aggressive, frustrated by his inability to land a clean shot. Maya stayed mobile, staying in the zones where his advantages became liabilities, where his size meant slower transitions and his reach created openings. She scored hits to his legs, his ribs, his neck, none powerful enough to end the fight but each contributing to the accumulation of damage, the slow erosion of his confidence. In the gallery, the betting odds began to shift. Silence replaced the earlier chatter, then Kreta changed tactics. He stopped trying to strike her and instead went for a grapple, his long arms spreading wide to corral her. It was the smart move. On the ground, his weight advantage would become overwhelming. Maya saw the shift, understood his intent, and made her choice. Instead of retreating, she dove forward into the grapple, accepting it on her terms. They went down in a tangle of limbs, Krala's weight crushed down on her, exactly as he had planned, his superior mass pinning her to the mat. Around the gallery, several cadets stood, certain the fight was over, but Maya was already moving, her body twisting in ways that exploited the fundamental mechanics of human joint structure, techniques developed over thousands of years of humans fighting humans, principles that applied equally to any bipedal opponent with similar skeletal composition. She threaded her leg over his arm, hooking behind his head, her other leg cutting across his body. Kurt realized too late what was happening. He tried to pull free, but the armbar was already locked in, her hips elevated, his elbow hyperextended across her pelvis. The choice was simple: submit or suffer a shattered joint. Kral tapped the mat 3 times in rapid succession. The energy barrier deactivated. Maya released immediately and rolled away, breathing hard, her body screaming from the brief moment of supporting his full weight. The gallery exploded in noise. Shock, disbelief, genuine appreciation from the martial artists, among the spectators who understood what they had just witnessed. Maya stood slowly, extending her hand to Kral. The Tharn stared at it for a long moment before accepting, allowing her to help pull him to his feet despite the absurdity of her trying to lift his bulk. How? Kral asked simply. Your strength is a fraction of mine. Your bones are fragile. Your muscles are inefficient. How did you win? Maya met his eyes. Because for thousands of years, the most dangerous thing any human ever faced was another human. We had to learn how to overcome ourselves. That training translates to anyone with a similar skeletal structure. You are stronger, Kral, but our joints bend in the same directions. Our balance depends on the same principles. Our nervous systems respond to the same pressures. Commander Zrathix descended to the training floor, his forearms held in a gesture of acknowledgement. Cadet Chen, I stand corrected. Humans may lack natural weapons, but you have developed something potentially more dangerous. Systematic knowledge of how to disable opponents regardless of their physical advantages. With respect, Commander, you are still not seeing the complete picture. Maya replied. This is not just about martial arts. This is about human nature. We are the only species in the Federation that spent our entire evolutionary history as both predator and prey to our own kind. Every other species fought external threats. We fought ourselves. That made us different. That made us dangerous in ways the galaxy does not fully understand. She looked around the gallery at the assembled cadets. I did not come to this academy to prove humans are strong. We are not by galactic standards. I came here because someone needs to teach the Federation what happens when you corner a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing its own kind. The Kortheen pirates learned that lesson. Anyone who underestimates humanity will learn it too. The silence that followed her words carried weight. Finally, one cadet began a slow clapping. Then another, then dozens, hundreds, a thunderous applause that echoed through the facility. Not all of them joined in. Some faces showed concern, perhaps fear, at the implications of what Maya had demonstrated. But respect had been earned, the kind that only came through action. Over the following weeks, Maya's presence at the academy transformed. She was no longer the inadequate human, the token representative of a species too fragile for military service. Cadets began requesting her assistance with their combat training, asking her to demonstrate techniques, to explain principles of leverage and positioning and systematic advantage. She taught willingly, adapting human martial concepts to alien anatomies, finding universal truths in the physics of violence. Kral became an unexpected ally. The Tharn possessed warrior's pride but also warrior's respect for those who bested him fairly. He approached Maya 3 days after their match. I have been thinking about what you said, Kral told her as they walked through the crystal corridors between classes, about humans fighting humans, about developing martial sciences from internal conflict rather than external threat. It is disturbing. Disturbing how? Maya asked. Every species I know of united once they achieved space travel. The common thread of the void, the need for cooperation, it forged us into singular civilizations. But humans, you fought each other even as you reached for the stars. You brought your martial disciplines with you. You never stopped being dangerous to yourselves. Maya nodded slowly. We did. We still are. Humanity's greatest weakness is also our greatest strength. We cannot stop competing, cannot stop pushing, cannot stop testing ourselves against each other. It makes us difficult allies, but it also makes us survivors. When everyone else sees a threat too large to overcome, We see just another problem that needs a solution, another opponent that can be beaten with the right technique. They reached the entrance to the Tactical Simulation Center. Before they parted, Kral placed one three-fingered hand on her shoulder. I am glad humans are part of the Federation, Chen, but I am also cautious. Your species frightens me in ways the Kortheen never did. Good, Maya replied with a slight smile. That caution will keep you alive if we ever end up on opposite sides of a conflict. Months passed. Maya graduated in the top percentile of her class, her earlier struggles with perception overcome by undeniable results. She accepted a posting aboard the Federation cruiser Valiant Dawn, a mixed-species vessel tasked with border patrol and rapid response. Her role was officially listed as tactical specialist, but the crew quickly learned she offered something more valuable: the human perspective on conflict, on overcoming disadvantages, on finding solutions when conventional wisdom said none existed. 2 years into her service, the Valiant Dawn responded to a distress call from a mining colony in the Outer Reach. A mercenary force had seized the facility, taking 200 civilians hostage. The mercenaries were Kravathi, the same species as Commander Zrathix, powerful and disciplined, and armed with cutting-edge weaponry. The situation looked hopeless. A direct assault would result in massive civilian casualties. Negotiation had failed. The colony's orbital defenses had been disabled. Captain Vorin, a veteran Draxian with 40 years of service, called his senior staff to the briefing room. Maya stood among beings who dwarfed her, listening as various specialists presented options, each more pessimistic than the last. We need a small team to infiltrate before the main assault, Captain Vorthinely declared. Draw the mercenaries' attention, create chaos, give our forces an opening. That team would be walking into certain death, the tactical officer said flatly. The Kravathi have every entrance monitored. 4 arms, natural armor, superior numbers. They would cut down any infiltration squad before penetration of the facility's core. Maya raised her hand. Permission to propose an alternative approach, Captain. All eyes turned to her. After 2 years, the crew had learned to listen when the humans spoke up, but this situation seemed beyond even her unconventional thinking. Spay, Vortun commanded. You are correct that a conventional infiltration will fail, Maya began. The Kravathi expect tactics that rely on superior firepower or stealth technology. They have prepared for those responses. But they have not prepared for someone who does not fight the way they expect. She activated the holographic display showing the colony's layout. Give me 4 volunteers. Not your best soldiers. People who can think creatively, who can adapt, who understand that surviving is more important than winning with honor. I will teach them what I know. We go in unarmed, minimal equipment, using exactly what the Kravathi think makes us vulnerable. Our lack of natural weapons, our fragility, our desperation. You want to teach my crew human combat techniques in, what, a few hours? Gavor's tail twitched with skepticism. And use those techniques against armored Kravathi warriors? No, Captain. I want to teach them something more fundamental. How to think like prey that became predator. How to turn every disadvantage into advantage. How to survive when survival seems impossible. That is what humans learned across our entire history. That is what I can pass on. The room fell silent. Finally, Kral spoke from his position near the viewport. He had requested transfer to the Valiant Dawn 6 months after Maya, claiming he needed to understand the human perspective better. I vouch for Cadet Chen's methods, Captain. I have seen what she can do. More importantly, I have learned to think as she thinks. It changes everything. Kortheen studied Maya for a long moment. You have 6 hours to prepare your team. If this fails, those civilians die, and you die with them. Understood, Captain, Maya replied. But it will not fail. Humans do not know how to quit. We spent 10,000 years proving that to ourselves. Time to prove it to everyone else. What followed was the most intense training session Maya had ever conducted. 4 volunteers, a Velkorn technician, a Draxian engineer, a Tharn medic, and surprisingly, a young Kravathi communications officer who had been listening to her lectures and wanted to learn. She taught them not techniques, but principles. How to read an opponent, how to exploit openings, how to turn an enemy's strength into their downfall, how to accept that fair fights were for fools, and survivors did whatever worked. The infiltration itself became legend among the Valiant Dawn's crew. 5 beings entered a fortified position held by 30 mercenaries. They used ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, and psychological warfare that the Kravathi had never encountered. They struck from unexpected angles, disabled sentries with silent precision, and created such chaos that when the main assault force finally breached the facility, half the mercenaries had already surrendered in confusion. 0 civilian casualties. 1 minor injury among the infiltration team, complete success where conventional tactics had predicted complete failure. In the aftermath, Maya stood in the facility's command center, watching Federation forces securing the prisoners. Captain Vort approached, his reptilian features arranged in what she had learned was a Draxian expression of profound respect. "The Federation owes humanity an apology," Kortheen said quietly. "We thought you were the weakest species among us. We were wrong. You are perhaps the most dangerous, precisely because you do not fight as we expect." Maya shook her head. "We are not dangerous, Captain. We are survivors. There is a difference. Dangerous implies we seek conflict. We do not. But when conflict finds us, when survival demands it, we remember what 10,000 years of human history taught us. That the strongest do not always win. That the clever, the desperate, the ones willing to do what others will not, those are the ones who endure." She looked out at the rescued civilians, families reuniting, children crying in relief. Every human carries that legacy. "We are not warriors by nature, Captain. We are problem solvers who learned that sometimes problems have violent solutions. That makes us adaptable. That makes us unpredictable. And yes, that makes us frightening to species who have never had to fight themselves to survive." Years later, when Maya achieved the rank of commander herself, when she established the Federation's first cross-species martial training program, when she became the leading expert on asymmetric combat doctrine, she sometimes thought back to that lecture hall on Virath Prime, to Commander Zrathix announcing that humans were defenseless without their technology, to Kringlal's friendly dismissal of her species' combat capabilities. She had proven them wrong, but more importantly, she had helped the galaxy understand what humanity truly offered. Not superior strength or natural weapons or evolutionary advantages, instead the accumulated knowledge of a species that had spent its entire existence learning to overcome itself, developing systematic approaches to violence that worked regardless of physical disparities. In class, he had said humans do not fight barehanded. She had quietly lifted her hand and challenged his claim. In doing so, she had changed how the Federation understood warfare, survival, and the dangerous potential hiding inside every seemingly fragile human form. The galaxy learned to respect humanity not for what they could build, but for what they had always been. Survivors, adapters, the species that turned disadvantages into victory through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. And that lesson Maya knew was worth more than any natural weapon evolution could provide. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.